Operation Cold Silence.
I still don't know why they sent us out there. 4 men, dropped in the middle of Siberia with orders stamped in red across a file folder that was too thin for comfort. Retrieve the package, secure any surviving data, leave nothing behind, that was it. No briefing, no context, just the kind of directive that smells of old Cold War ghosts. The snow came down in walls when we landed, thick and heavy, turning the horizon into a white blur. The air tasted metallic, every breath burning cold. My rifle felt useless in my hands, more like a stick than a weapon. The storm swallowed sound except for the crunch of our boots and the labored rasp of our masks. I was Team Lid, Captain Hughes. With me was Alvarez, who never shut up until the cold froze the humor out of him. Doc Renner, who kept muttering under his breath like he was reciting prayers between breaths. And Private Kim, fresh out of training, barely old enough to shave. It took us 6 hours to find the entrance, half buried under ice and stone. The bunker door was black iron, rimmed with frost that looked like veins spidering outward. A Soviet star still glared above it, chipped but unbroken. It took all 4 of us to force it open. The hinges screamed like something alive, and then the smell hit. Stale, trapped air, heavy with mold and rust. The kind of air that hasn't been touched by sunlight for decades. We stepped into silence. The storm outside faded the moment the door shut. Our lights carved tunnels through dust, broken pipes, and icicles clinging like teeth from the ceiling. A map on the wall, half decayed, told us what we already knew. Laboratories, barracks, comms rooms, all buried beneath the ice. But the first thing that made my stomach turn wasn't the cold or the smell. It was the bodies. They were everywhere, frozen mid-motion, their skin gray and cracked, their mouths open in silent screams. Some sat at desks, pens still in hand. Others lay in doorways, as if they'd been crawling to escape. Eyes wide. Not dead with peace, but caught in the exact moment of terror. Kim whispered,
"What the hell happened here?"
I didn't answer, because I didn't know. We moved deeper. The further we went, the colder it became, like heat was being sucked out of us instead of generated by our bodies. Frost crawled across the walls, thickening until whole corridors looked like glass tubes. Doc Renner kept muttering prayers in Russian. He was from Belarus originally, and I could tell he recognized something here. He wouldn't say it, though. Just shook his head and gripped his med kit until his knuckles went white. The comms room was where the first real strangeness happened. Old equipment sat dead under sheets of ice. Radios, monitors, tape reels, dust thick enough to choke. Alvarez started messing with the console, brushing frost off dials. He laughed, though it sounded forced.
Cold War tech. Bet this thing's got more asbestos than circuits.
Then it came alive. No one touched a switch, but the radio hissed. A voice crackled through the static, warped, broken, like someone speaking from deep underwater.
"Hughes,
I froze. It was my wife's voice.
please come home."
Every hair on my body stood on end. Alvarez stared at me, then at the radio.
What the fuck was that?
Renner made the sign of the cross. Kim looked like he might bolt. I tried the dial, but the knobs wouldn't move. The voice kept coming, breaking, stuttering. And then, silence. The only sound was the drip of melting ice. We left the room, but something followed us. Footsteps, faint, just behind ours. Every time I turned, the beam of my flashlight caught nothing but dust swirling in the air. Alvarez cracked another joke. It fell flat. We reached the central lab at 0300 hours. The door was sealed with thick bars, as if whatever was inside wasn't meant to get out. It took all of us forcing together to pry them loose. The door shrieked open. The chamber beyond was massive. Walls lined with cracked glass tanks, filled with frozen remains. Some human, some animal, some neither. Faces distorted in agony, bodies stretched in ways that shouldn't have been possible. In the center stood a slab of ice, black as obsidian, rising 20 feet tall. Our lights slid off it like oil, reflections bending wrong. I don't know how long we stood there staring. The surface began to ripple, as if something beneath the ice shifted. And then, it showed us. Reflections, but not ours. 4 figures, yes, but their faces twisted, warped. My reflection was smiling, though I wasn't. Renner's was weeping blood. Kim's jaw hung slack like it had unhinged. Alvarez's reflection had no eyes. Then the reflections started moving on their own. I stumbled back. My breath came fast, freezing in the air. The figures stepped closer on the other side of the ice, pressing their palms against it. The sound was like nails dragging on glass. And then one of them leaned forward, my reflection, and whispered against the barrier. But the whisper wasn't muffled. It was right in my ear.
Let us out.
Things unraveled after that. Renner collapsed, whispering prayers faster and faster. Kim wouldn't stop crying. Alvarez shouted, swore, screamed at the ice. The reflection smiled. Then they started to step out. Not through cracks or doors, just out. Like the surface wasn't solid anymore, but water. Their forms slid through, skin peeling, reshaping, until they stood with us. 4 shadows made of frost and bone, their faces still twisted mockeries of our own. The lights died, gunfire erupted, pointless, deafening. The shadows didn't bleed. Bullets passed through like smoke, but each shot made them stronger, clearer, more solid. Alvarez screamed as one touched him. His skin blackened with frost, cracking until he shattered like glass. Renner's prayers turned to shrieks as his own reflection wrapped around him, folding him into itself until there was nothing left. Kim ran. His boots echoed into the dark until a second set joined in, then a third, then silence. I was alone. I pulled the charges from my pack with shaking hands. I set them around the slab, wiring them by memory, because my eyes blurred with tears and cold. The reflections circled me, smiling, whispering. My wife's voice, my son's voice, voices of people long gone. When the timer was set, I looked once more into the ice. My reflection stared back, calm, smiling. It mouthed words I didn't want to understand.
You never left.
The explosion shook the world apart. I remember fire, ice shattering, screams that weren't human, then nothing. When I woke, I was outside. The storm had cleared. The sky was pale blue. Snow stretched for miles. The bunker was gone, collapsed into a crater. No sign of Alvarez, no sign of Renner, no sign of Kim, no sign of me. Because when I staggered to the frozen surface of the crater and looked down into a sheet of black ice, I saw myself, smiling, and my reflection didn't move when I did.
Blackout in the valley.
The valley was wrong the moment they saw it. The mountains around it rose jagged and sheer, their stone faces lit by the late Afghan sun. A river cut through the middle, dried to a trickle of brown water. The village lay in the bowl of the valley, a scatter of mud brick homes, goats' pens, and a single crumbling minaret rising like a finger to the sky. It should have looked ordinary, but it didn't. Lieutenant Mason led the patrol with his rifle shouldered, boots crunching dry earth. Behind him marched Corporal Jackson. His friends called him Jinx because everything around him broke at the worst time. Then came Sergeant Vega, broad-shouldered and quiet, eyes scanning the hills with the kind of suspicion born from years of knowing the land could bite back at any second. Last was Farid, the interpreter, walking a little apart, his face pale and lips pressed thin. No birds, no goats, no smoke from cooking fires, no voices carrying across the wind. The village was silent.
This place gives me the creeps,
Jackson muttered. His voice carried more than he intended, bouncing off the rocks.
Shut it,
Vega hissed.
Keep your eyes open.
But Mason already felt it too, that unnatural quiet. War zones were never silent. Even in the emptiest Afghan hamlets, there were always sounds. A crying child, a barking dog, the shuffle of sandals on dust. But here, nothing. Not even wind through the valley grass. Farid slowed his pace, his gaze locked on the minaret.
Lieutenant,
He said quietly.
we should not be here. This place is, bad.
Mason shot him a look.
Bad how?
Farid didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted to the empty doorways ahead.
My grandfather used to tell stories. Ghouls in the caves. They take whole villages. They eat not just the body, but the soul.
Jackson snorted,
Yeah, great. Ghost stories. Real helpful.
but no one laughed with him. The squad entered the first street. It felt more like a stage than a place where people had lived. Doors hung half open. Windows stared out, blank and black. A water jug sat overturned, its contents long dried. Mason raised a hand. They fanned out, clearing each doorway. Every house was the same, abandoned in a rush. Bowls still on tables, blankets unrolled. A doll left in the dirt floor, its cloth face eaten by moths. But no bodies, not a single one. The deeper they went, the colder the air grew. Mason frowned. The sun still glared overhead, but a chill crawled across his skin. He pulled his scarf tighter.
Smells like iron,
Vega muttered. He wasn't wrong. The air reeked faintly of rust and rot, metallic and sharp. In one home, they found blood smeared along the wall in finger-wide streaks. Not sprayed, not splattered, dragged. The prints led up to the ceiling, vanishing into the dark beams. Jackson stared at it for a long moment, before muttering.
Nope. Fuck this.
Farid whispered something in Pashto, an old prayer, his voice shaking. They kept moving. By the time they reached the village square, Mason's unease had hardened into dread. A well stood in the center, its rope frayed and hanging. Around it, the earth was disturbed. Shallow mounds, dozens of them, like graves half dug and abandoned. Vega crouched, brushing dust aside. His gloved hand came back with something pale. A bone, small, child-sized, chewed through at one end. They all stared at it. No one spoke. They set camp in one of the sturdier houses, sandbagging the windows, laying out trip flares in the street. The sun bled out over the mountains, and the valley sank into blackness. The silence deepened. No crickets, no wind, only the sound of their own breathing. Mason took first watch on the roof. His night vision goggles painted the world green. The minaret loomed at the edge of the village, its top cracked, shadows pooling in its hollow windows. He swept the scope slowly. Empty alleys, still rooftops. Nothing moved. Then he heard it. A voice. Faint, carried on no wind.
Lieutenant.
His blood froze. It was his brother's voice. His brother who'd been dead for 3 years. Mason clenched his jaw, gripping the rifle tighter. He told himself it was stress, exhaustion, his brain conjuring ghosts. But then the voice came again, clearer.
Calm down, Mason. I need you.
He spun, scanning the alleys. No movement, nothing on thermals. Below, a trip flare hissed and died. By the time Vega climbed up to relieve him, Mason's hands were trembling. He said nothing, just shoved the rifle into Vega's arms and went downstairs. Inside, Jackson was pale, sitting against the wall with his headset off.
Radio's fucked,
He muttered.
keeps picking up chatter.
What kind of chatter?
Mason asked. Jackson's eyes flicked up. They were wide.
Us!
At 0200, the first scream came. High, sharp, cut off in the middle. They bolted outside, rifles raised. The flare light burned sickly red, casting long shadows across the dirt. Farid pointed.
There.
A figure darted between alleys, just out of sight. Barefoot. Fast. Mason led them forward, boots hammering the dust, flashlights slashing through the dark. The figure vanished around a corner. They followed. The alley was empty. Only the smell of rot remained. Something scuttled above them. They raised rifles. A shape crawled along the wall, too long, too thin, arms and legs bending backward as it clung to the mud brick like an insect. Jackson fired first. The figure dropped to the ground, but when the beam hit it, there was nothing there. Only disturbed dust. Farid whispered a prayer again, faster this time.
They are here,
He said.
the ghouls. They wear our faces.
At dawn, they found the tracks. Bare footprints, dozens of them, leading out of the village and into the cliffs. The prints were fresh. Mason ordered them to follow. The path wound upward, narrow and treacherous, until it ended at a cave mouth. Dark air breathed out, cold as a grave. They entered. The tunnel sloped downward, the walls slick with moisture, the air thick with that iron stink. Their lights caught bones, half buried in mud. Not scattered, not random, arranged in patterns, spirals, circles. Jackson whispered,
We shouldn't be here.
Then they reached the chamber. It was vast, stretching beyond their beams. The floor was carpeted with bodies, dozens, maybe hundreds, villagers laid out in rows. Their eyes were open, mouths slack, skin grey as ash. But they weren't still. Their chests rose and fell, shallow, synchronized, breathing. Vega swore under his breath. Jackson gagged. Farid crossed himself and whispered to the dark. And then the villagers' eyes turned, all at once, toward the soldiers. Movement rippled through the chamber. Bodies sat up, slow and jerking. Joints cracked like breaking branches. The soldiers raised rifles, the air filled with clicks and static, the sound of radios spitting nonsense, overlapping until the cavern echoed with voices. Mason's own voice among them, Vega's, Jackson's. The villagers rose, swaying, mouths opening wider than human. Shadows peeled away from the walls, merging with them, twisting their faces into grotesque imitations of the soldiers standing frozen. Mason fired. The round punched clean through one body. It staggered but didn't fall. Its face shifted mid-step, becoming Mason's own, grinning back at him with hollow eyes. The chamber erupted. Figures surged forward. Too many, too fast. The squad fell back, rifles roaring, muzzle flashes carving chaos into the dark. Bullets tore holes, but the creatures just kept coming, limbs bending wrong, skin splitting without blood. Farid went down first, dragged into the pile, his screams cutting short. Jackson broke next, bolting for the tunnel. Mason saw him vanish into blackness, his screams echoing, and then silenced by a wet snap. Vega held the line with Mason, but the tide was endless. Shapes swarmed, voices layered, whispering in familiar tones, beckoning, taunting. One reached Vega, its face flickering between strangers and his mother, his dead brother, his own reflection. He faltered for half a second. It was enough. They tore him under. Mason alone stumbled back, firing, shouting, light flickering. His beam caught the ceiling, and he saw it. Not villagers, not men, but one thing. A mass fused together, limbs woven, torsos merging, crawling across the stone like a centipede made of human forms. Its many mouths opened as one, and spoke.
Stay.
Mason ran. He didn't remember how he made it out. Only the slam of daylight, the cut of sharp air, the endless scramble down the rocks. His rifle was gone. His pack was gone. His men were gone. Behind him, the valley was quiet again. The village lay still, the cave mouth just another shadow in the cliffs. When the extraction bird found him 3 days later, he was half frozen, dehydrated, delirious. He never spoke in detail about what happened. The after-action report was thin. Patrol lost to enemy engagement. Lieutenant Mason sole survivor. But in the nights that followed, long after he'd been shipped home, he heard them still. Voices whispering in static, seeping through the walls. His own voice, calling him back. And when he looked into the mirror, sometimes, just for a moment, his reflection smiled at him.
The Hollow Jungle.
I was 19 when they sent me into the jungle. 19, carrying 70 pounds of gear, sweating through my uniform before the sun even cleared the canopy. They told me it would be a simple recon patrol. Move north, check on enemy movement, report back. But nothing in Vietnam was simple. Not the people, not the war, and certainly not the jungle. There were 4 of us. Lieutenant Harper, calm, older than most, the kind of officer who looked carved from stone. Sergeant Brooks, hard-eyed, hard-mouthed, the veteran who thought he'd seen everything. Private Ellis, same age as me, maybe younger, still with that shine in his eyes that said he hadn't yet accepted death was just part of the contract. And me. We also had Wynn, our scout. He was wiry, sharp-eyed, and never said more than necessary. The lieutenant trusted him. Brooks didn't. Ellis tried to make friends. Me, I just followed his lead. The jungle waited for us. We stepped off before dawn. Humidity wrapped around us like a wet blanket. The air stank of mud, rotting leaves, and the faint coppery smell of old blood that clung to everything in country. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds, whining at our ears, drilling through our uniforms. The jungle wasn't just trees. It was alive, louder than war. Frogs croaked, birds shrieked, unseen things rustled in the undergrowth. Vines hung like nooses from branches, roots coiled like snakes across the ground. The further we moved, the more it felt like the jungle itself wanted us gone. Every step was a struggle. Mud sucking at boots, branches clawing faces, thorns biting arms. Wind led, moving like water, barely disturbing a leaf. The rest of us stumbled behind. Ellis tried to talk once, some nervous chatter about baseball back home. Brooks shut him down with a glare. Words didn't belong out here. Out here, sound was bait. By noon, we were soaked in sweat. Harper called for a halt. We crouched in a small clearing, eating rations that tasted like damp cardboard. That's when I noticed it. The silence. The jungle had gone quiet. No birds, no frogs, no rustle. Just the ringing of my own heartbeat in my ears. I met Harper's eyes. He felt it too.
"Move,"
he said. It started with the footprints. Wynn found them at the edge of a stream. Bare feet, too many of them, pressed deep into the mud. Not enemy boots, not villagers, just feet, dozens of them. They led upstream, vanishing into dense ferns. We followed, slowly. The air grew cooler, unnaturally so. Mist clung to the water, swirling around our ankles. I thought I heard something under it. A whisper, faint, carried by the current. Words I couldn't understand. Ellis whispered.
You hear that?
Brooks growled at him to shut up, but I knew he'd heard it too. His jaw was tight, his rifle clutched too hard. We pressed on. By evening, we found the camp. At least, what was left of it. NVA, maybe a dozen of them. Or what was left of them. The bodies were piled in the center of the clearing, stripped of weapons, uniforms shredded. Their eyes were open, mouths locked in silent screams. Skin pale, veins black, like something had drained them hollow. The strangest part wasn't the bodies. It was the trees. Every trunk surrounding the clearing was carved. Deep gouges, spirals, and circles etched into the bark. Symbols that hurt to look at, twisting, shifting if you stared too long. Ellis gagged. Wynn muttered something fast, low, shaking his head. Harper pulled us back. We didn't touch anything. We didn't speak. But the jungle had spoken, and we had heard it. We marched all night. No rest. Harper wanted distance between us and that clearing, but the jungle didn't let us leave. At first, it was subtle. A tree we passed that looked familiar. A stream crossing that felt the same as the last one. By dawn, it wasn't subtle anymore. We walked for 6 hours and came back to the same clearing. The same pile of bodies, now bloated in the heat. The same carved trees. The same impossible symbols. Ellis broke first. He threw his pack down, swearing, screaming that we were lost, that the jungle was playing with us. Brooks hit him hard enough to split his lip.
"Shut your mouth,"
he hissed.
"Jungle plays with no one. We're just turned around."
But his eyes betrayed him. He didn't believe it either. Wynn knelt in the mud, whispering in Vietnamese. I caught one word, repeated like a prayer. Ma Lai. Ghosts. Sleep was impossible. We huddled in a circle that night, rifles in laps, eyes darting at every shadow. That's when the whispers came. At first, just on the edge of hearing. A murmur, like wind through leaves. Then clearer. Voices we knew. My mother, calling my name. My brother, laughing. A girl I'd loved back home, whispering promises. Ellis heard them too. I saw his eyes glaze, his lips move as if answering. He rose, slow, like a man in a dream, and began walking into the dark. Harper grabbed him.
"Sit down, Private."
Ellis struggled. Tears streaked his dirt-caked face.
It's my dad. He's alive. He needs me.
Brooks slammed the butt of his rifle into Ellis's gut. The boy crumpled, sobbing. The voices laughed. Low, mocking, echoing from every direction. We didn't sleep. The next day, the jungle began to watch us. I felt it first, that prickle on the back of the neck, the certainty of eyes boring into your skull. I scanned the canopy, the shadows, the vines. Nothing moved, but the feeling didn't fade. Then Brooks saw it. A shape, high above, perched between branches, too far to see clearly. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't a monkey, it was long, thin, limbs bent wrong. When Brooks raised his rifle, it slid back into the leaves without a sound. We moved faster. No brakes, no words. The jungle grew denser, darker, the air thicker, choking with humidity. Our canteens ran dry. Sweat stung our eyes. Every step felt like sinking into tar. By evening, Harper called halt. His voice shook. That's when I knew he felt it too. The dread, the wrongness pressing in on us. Wynn refused to sit. He stood at the edge of the clearing, staring into the trees, whispering that word again. Ma'alai. Ma'alai. When I finally asked him what it meant, he told me, "Dead that do not stay dead. They take your shape, they take your soul." He wouldn't look at me as he said it. We stumbled into another clearing on the third day. An American camp, or what had been one. Tents shredded, sandbags torn open, weapons scattered in the mud. No men, not at first. Then we saw them. Hanging from the trees, half a dozen soldiers, strung up like meat. Their eyes open, their mouths moving soundlessly, as if still trying to speak. Ellis vomited. Brooks cursed. Harper froze, his hand trembling on his rifle. Wynn dropped to his knees, bowing his head, whispering. I forced myself to look, to really look, and I saw that their shadows didn't match. The bodies swayed in one direction, their shadows twisted the other. One shadow raised its head and smiled at me. By nightfall, we were broken. Brooks snapped first. He started muttering about ambushes, about NVA ghosts. He fired into the trees at nothing, screaming curses. Harper tried to restrain him. Brooks turned the rifle on him. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd pull the trigger. Then the jungle did it for him. Something dropped from the canopy, a blur of limbs and teeth. It hit Brooks hard enough to crack bone. His scream cut short, blood sprayed across the ferns. We opened fire, tracers shredding the dark. Whatever it was, it moved too fast. The trees swallowed it whole. When the gunfire stopped, the jungle was silent again. Brooks was gone. Only his rifle lay in the mud. We tried to leave. God help us, we tried. But the paths bent back on themselves. No matter how far we walked, we returned to the same clearings, the same streams, the same symbols carved into bark. The jungle wasn't space, it wasn't distance. It was a maze that shifted around us. Ellis began to laugh, high, broken laughter. He pointed at the trees, at faces only he could see.
I see them,
he giggled.
They're us. They're waiting.
Harper shook him, tried to snap him out of it. But Ellis just kept laughing. That night he slipped away. We found him at dawn, or what was left of him. He hung from a branch, swaying, smiling with his lips split ear to ear. His eyes stared blankly, but his mouth whispered, perfectly clear.
Welcome.
Only 3 of us remained. Me, Harper, Wynn. We stopped counting time. The jungle devoured it. We moved like ghosts, half dead already, rifles clutched out of habit more than hope. Our bodies ached, blistered, hollow, our minds frayed. And still the jungle whispered. Still it called our names in familiar voices. Still it showed us glimpses of things not meant for the living. Shadows followed us, not our shadows. At night I dreamed of vines wrapping my throat, of roots crawling into my skin. I woke with dirt under my nails, mud in my mouth. Harper grew quieter. His eyes sunk deep. He stared at nothing for long stretches, lips moving silently. Wynn avoided him. Avoided me too. He muttered that we were marked, that the jungle had claimed us. I almost believed him. It ended in the heart of the jungle. We stumbled into a clearing wider than any we'd seen. The canopy opened, letting in a shaft of pale moonlight. At the center stood a tree. No, not a tree. A tower of flesh and bark, roots woven through bodies, torsos and skulls fused into its trunk. Their mouths opened and closed, whispering in unison. Eyes rolled sightlessly. Hands reached out, grasping nothing. The hollow jungle. That's what it was. Not a place, a hunger. The ground pulsed under our boots. Vines slithered, faces swelled from the soil, moaning. Wynn dropped to his knees, sobbing. Harper just stared, hollow. And I I don't know why I didn't scream, because I saw myself in that tree. A face, half formed in the bark. My face. Its lips moved. Stay. I don't know how I got out. One moment I was there, staring at myself in that tree. The next, I was stumbling through the jungle, empty-handed, half dead. An American patrol found me days later. They said I was the only survivor. The report said the rest of my squad were killed in action, ambushed, enemy engagement, but I know better. The jungle doesn't let go. At night, when I close my eyes, I hear it breathing. I smell the rot, the blood, the earth swallowing. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, the reflection doesn't move with me. It just smiles.
Silent running.
The Navy told us this would be routine. Routine doesn't exist in the depths. We were ordered to run silent beneath the Greenland Sea, tracking Soviet movements near the Arctic Circle. A week submerged, nothing unusual. A ghost run. I'd commanded submarines for 8 years. I thought I understood the ocean, the darkness, the silence, the endless black water pressing on every side. You learn to live with it. To breathe stale air and ignore the way the walls groan like something alive. But nothing prepares you for the deep. Not really. There were 60 men aboard, 60 souls sealed inside a steel coffin, slipping silently under waves that had swallowed ships for centuries. When I closed the hatch that morning, I didn't know I was sealing it behind us for good. The first days passed as they always do. Drills, watches, routine. The hum of machinery filled every space. Diesel tang lingered in the recycled air. Men joked quietly at their bunks. Cards slapped on tables. Coffee boiled until it tasted like tar. But beneath it all was the silence. A submarine runs quiet when ordered. Engines muffled. Crew muted. Every sound is a betrayal. And in that silence, the mind wanders. I kept the log as always. Position, depth, headings. 220 meters below. No contacts, no anomalies. But then the sonar started to whisper. Not a contact, not an enemy, something else. Faint clicks, knocks. Too rhythmic to be ice. Too irregular to be mechanical. My sonar chief swore it was nothing. I believed him. I had to. But I heard it too. Day 4. The air tasted of sweat and oil. The crew moved slower, weighed down by fatigue and something heavier. Whispers spread. Men claimed they heard knocking on the hull, like someone tapping from outside. 3 knocks. Then silence. 3 more, hours later. The ocean doesn't knock. One sailor swore he heard voices through the pipes, his mother's voice. Another claimed he saw a shadow slip past the mess doorway, too tall to be anyone aboard. Brooks, my executive officer, dismissed it as stress, long watches, stale air.
Men go stir-crazy down here, Captain. Always have.
But his eyes told me he didn't believe his own words. That night, the hull groaned louder than I'd ever heard, like a whale's cry, like the submarine itself was afraid. On the 5th day, sonar caught something impossible. A signal, a ping, old, faint, like a ghost echo. It repeated every 30 seconds, low and warped, not Soviet, not American, not anything logged in our books. We traced it. It came from deeper, always deeper. Brooks advised we ignore it, but the men were restless. They whispered that following it might lead to the surface, a way out. They spoke as if we were lost, though our instruments were steady. Against instinct, I ordered us to descend. 250 meters, then 300, then 350. The signal grew louder, and with it the knocking returned. Not 3 taps now, but many, too many, like dozens of hands beating on the hull. At 400 meters, the pressure becomes a monster. Steel bends, rivets scream, every breath feels borrowed. That's when the first man broke. Seaman Lewis began pounding at the control room viewport, shrieking that something was staring in. We restrained him, but I looked too. And I saw it, a face, pressed against the glass. Pale, bloated, hair drifting like seaweed, eyes open, mouth moving soundlessly. Then another face, and another. Men, women, children, all drifting past, staring in, whispering through the water. There are no windows on a submarine at that depth. The glass was my mind. But when I turned, I saw the same horror etched in every crewman's eyes. We all saw them. The signal drew us deeper. I couldn't stop it. Every attempt to change course failed. Controls jammed, compasses spun. Depth gauges froze, then surged lower. We descended without orders. The knocking became a roar. Voices rose from the pipes, chanting in languages none of us knew. The air tasted foul, like rot. Sleep brought no escape. Men dreamed of drowning, of hands dragging them through bulkheads, of oceans made of blood. Some never woke. They lay in their bunks, eyes open, water dribbling from their mouths though the compartment was dry. We buried them in silence, wrapping them in canvas, slipping them through the torpedo hatch into the sea. But hours later, their faces returned at the glass, smiling. The depth gauge read 600 meters. Impossible for our class. The hull should have imploded. Yet we lived. If living is what you call it. Men moved like ghosts. Skin pale, eyes sunken, breath shallow. The food tasted of salt no matter what we ate. Water from the tanks turned brackish. Brooks confronted me in the control room, said we had to surface, said I was dooming us. But when I looked at him, I saw water trickling from his ears. His skin bloated, fingers swollen like drowned flesh. He didn't notice. None of them noticed. Except me. The signal led us to it. A trench. Blacker than night. Deeper than charts recorded. And at its heart, a shape, a structure, not rock, not nature. Built, carved. Pillars of stone rising from the abyss, etched with symbols that twisted if you stared too long. Arches vast enough for ships to pass through, and movement between them. Shadows longer than submarines. Eyes that glowed faintly, like embers drowning. The signal pulsed from there, a heartbeat, a summons. We hovered above it. And the ocean knocked once more. Not on the hull. Inside it. I lost track of time. Men vanished in silence. One moment at their post, the next, gone. Bunk empty. Locker open. Boots still neatly placed. Others changed. Skin sloughed pale, voices warped. They whispered in unison, eyes rolling white. Brooks was one of them. He stood in the control room, smiling too wide, water spilling from his lips.
"Deeper, Captain,"
he said, though his mouth didn't move with the words.
"It's waiting."
Wynne, our sonar chief, shot him. The bullet passed through like smoke. Brooks laughed, a bubbling, drowning laugh. The others joined him. I locked myself in my cabin. I could still hear them outside, knocking on the door, whispering my name. The log is all I have left. The submarine moves without my hand, controls dead. Crew gone or hollowed. The engine hums with a life not mechanical. We descend endlessly, past maps, past reason, past light. The hull no longer groans. It sighs. I see through the steel now. The water isn't outside anymore. It's in us. In me. Faces drift past, familiar, every man I ever served with, my mother, my wife, my child. Their mouths move in chorus, "Stay." And I know I will. If this log is ever found, know this. The ocean isn't empty. It never was. It hungers, it remembers. And in its depths, something waits, something that wears the faces of the drowned. We thought we commanded the sea, but we were only passengers.
And now, I hear it knocking again.
Not from the hull, from inside my skull.
Operation Ashen Sky.
The desert was supposed to be empty. Operation Ashen Sky began as a standard reconnaissance mission. A squad of 8 American soldiers deployed under the cover of night, tasked with investigating unusual satellite readings in a barren stretch of Iraqi desert. Reports spoke of heat anomalies, disturbances in the ionosphere. Nothing more. They were veterans of countless patrols. Sand, stone, endless stars. The desert was familiar, predictable. But that night, the sky betrayed them. It began as a whisper of thunder, distant and strange, without clouds to carry it. Then came the wind, hot and sharp, cutting through fatigues like blades. By the time they reached the coordinates, the world was gone. Above them, the stars had vanished, smothered by a roiling canopy of ash. The moon was a faint smear behind clouds that moved too fast, curling and folding as if alive. The desert floor vibrated under their boots. And then the lightning came. Not white, not blue, but black, bolts of pure shadow slashing across the sky, leaving behind scars that lingered like cracks in glass. The soldiers had no name for it, but the desert did. The squad moved in 2 files, weapons ready, eyes scanning. Staff Sergeant Maddox led them, hard-faced, scarred, the kind of man who gave orders without raising his voice. He trusted the mission less than he trusted the desert, which was to say, not at all. Behind him trudged Corporal Dwyer, young, wiry, endlessly chewing gum to hide his nerves. Beside him was Private Hale, heavy-shouldered, silent, his gaze fixed on horizons no longer visible. Specialist Torres carried the comms pack, antenna cutting the ash-filled air. She muttered into her headset, trying and failing to reach command. Further back came Sergeant Price, the medic, face pale under his helmet. He whispered prayers under his breath, each one swallowed by the storm. And at the rear, Captain Reeves, their CO. He had insisted on joining the patrol personally, though men whispered he wasn't the same since Afghanistan. He spoke little. He listened often. His silence carried weight heavier than rank. 8 soldiers walked into the desert that night. Only one would walk out. The coordinates led them to a village, or what was left of one. The huts were blackened husks, roofs caved in, walls melted as if from impossible heat. No bodies, no animals, no signs of life. Only ash, ankle deep, clinging to boots, seeping into lungs. Dwyer muttered about chemical weapons. Hale disagreed. Nothing human burned that way. Torres finally caught a signal. A burst of static. A voice screaming in Arabic before dissolving into a roar too deep to belong to any man. The village's well was filled not with water, but with black glass. Smooth, seamless, as if the desert itself had been fused. Maddox ordered a perimeter. The squad fanned out, rifles raised, though each man knew instinctively there was no enemy here. Nothing to shoot, nothing to kill. Still, they felt eyes on them. From every collapsed doorway. From the sky itself. When Price stumbled over the first corpse, It nearly broke them. It wasn't burned. It wasn't shot. It was hollow. A skin, shriveled, stretched across bones as if the flesh had been drunk away, leaving only the memory of a man. They found more. Dozens. Men, women, children, every face frozen in a silent scream. Night deepened. The storm above thickened, the clouds pulsing like a living lung. Lightning cracked in silence, illuminating the desert in brief, terrible flashes. Each flash showed the squad something different. Dwyer swore he saw movement, soldiers standing in the distance, rifles raised. But when the light faded, nothing remained. Torres froze mid-step, headset pressed to her ear. She heard her mother's voice. Her mother had been dead for 10 years. Hale saw shadows crawling on the ground, moving against the wind. Price refused to look up at all. He kept his gaze on the ash at his boots, whispering faster, his prayers tumbling into nonsense. And Reeves watched the sky without blinking, as if it whispered directly to him. When Maddox shouted his name, the captain finally looked away. His eyes were black with reflection. Torres' radio screamed at 0200 hours. Every man clutched his head as static poured from the headset, louder than any weapon, sharper than any blast. Within it, voices layered, English, Arabic, Russian, languages unrecognizable. All said the same word. Stay. The sound shattered glass. Rifle optics cracked, goggles splintered. Men screamed, falling to their knees. Only Reeves stood tall, headset pressed to his ear, smiling faintly. When the static ended, silence fell thicker than ash, but the village was no longer empty. They emerged from the huts, from the alleys, from the glass well. Figures. Not soldiers, not villagers, not living. Hollow skins, stretched tight, eyes black pits. They moved without sound, without weight, drifting like ash caught in wind. The squad opened fire. Rounds shredded them, tearing holes through torsos, heads, limbs. The skins fluttered like torn cloth, then sealed again. Price was the first to fall, dragged screaming into the well, his cries muffled, then gone. Dwyer broke next, firing wildly until a dozen hollow faces swarmed him, peeling his skin from his bones in silence. Hale tried to run. The ash rose like a tide, swallowing him. His screams echoed long after he vanished. Torres dropped the radio and begged it to stop, her mother's voice calling her name until she tore off her own headset. Maddox pulled her away, dragging her into the dunes, but the ash followed. Only Reeves did not run. He walked into the hollow shapes as if greeting old friends. They parted for him, circling, whispering. When Maddox turned back, he saw his captain lift his face to the sky and open his mouth wide. The ash poured in. Maddox and Torres staggered through the dunes, blind in the storm. Their lungs burned, their skin cracked. Every breath tasted of death. The desert was no longer desert. The sand shifted like liquid, flowing uphill, pulling them back toward the village. Torres collapsed first. Maddox tried to carry her, but she screamed, clawing at her skin.
Something's inside me,
she cried, and then she split. Her body tore like paper, ash pouring out, her skin collapsing into nothing. Maddox was alone. He stumbled until his legs gave. He fell into the ash, sinking, choking. Above him, the sky opened. The clouds tore like a wound. Beyond them lay not stars, not heavens, but a vast red eye, unblinking, filling the sky. Its gaze turned the desert to glass. Maddox screamed until his throat bled, but the sound was swallowed. His skin blistered, cracked, peeled, and the eye whispered. Not in words, not in language, in hunger. It reached through the storm, through the ash, through the desert, into him. And he was gone? Weeks later, Command sent another patrol. They found the village buried in ash. No bodies, no traces of the squad, only the well remained. Black glass, perfectly smooth. When the wind passed, it echoed. Knocks, 3 at a time. And beneath the glass, if one listened closely, voices whispered. Not foreign, American, calling to be let out. Thank you again for tuning in to the Eerie Archives channel. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you'd like to see in the next video. Until next time, stay eerie.